You've probably walked past a building like this, maybe even gone inside, and if someone had stopped you on the sidewalk and asked you to count the windows from the street, you might have done it, you might have gotten to 9, and then you would have kept walking because why wouldn't you? But here's the part no one mentions. When you go inside that same building, when you take the elevator or the stairs, the buttons go up to 14, 14 floors, 9 windows. And no one ever asks why. It's not just one building, it's not even just one city. This pattern shows up in towers built across Europe, across North America, in places that had no contact with each other when these buildings went up. Different architects, different eras, different materials, but the same mismatch, the same quiet impossibility that no one seems to notice until it's pointed out, and once it is, it doesn't go away. Let's start with the simplest version of this. A tower in Manchester, 14 floors, the ground floor is retail, above that 13 floors of offices or residences depending on the year. The elevator panel is clear, buttons labeled 1 through 14, you can ride it yourself, you can step out on the 10th floor, walk to a window, look outside and see the street below. It's a real floor, it exists. But from the street, if you count the rows of windows going up the facade, you only get 9. At first that sounds like a trick of perspective. Maybe some floors are taller, maybe they combined windows, maybe the architect decided to make certain floors windowless for mechanical systems or storage. That's the explanation you'd probably settle on if you thought about it for 30 seconds and then moved on. And that explanation works, until you go back outside and look again, because the windows aren't unevenly spaced, they're uniform, same size, same height between each row, 9 rows, perfectly consistent. No gaps large enough to hide 5 extra floors, no floors tall enough to justify the height of the building when you stand back and look at it as a whole. The math doesn't add up, but the building is still standing, and people still go inside. Now, here's where it starts to get strange, because it's not just that building. There's another one in Brussels, another in Edinburgh, another in Toronto, different decades, different purposes. Some of them are hotels, some are apartment blocks. One of them is a government archive, but the pattern is the same. The number of floors inside is always higher than the number of window rows outside, not by 1, not by 2, by 5, sometimes 6. And no one wrote about it. There are no articles, no architectural journals dissecting the discrepancy, no Reddit threads where someone went down a rabbit hole and compiled a list. It's just there, repeated across distances too far for coincidence, too consistent to be error. You could argue that older buildings were renovated. Floors were added inside, but the facade stayed the same. That's reasonable. Except some of these buildings have the original blueprints, the original construction records, and the records match the number of floors you'd count from the inside. 14 floors, always 14 or close to it. The plans acknowledge them. The builders clearly built them, but the exterior presents 9. So either the architects designed the facade incorrectly every single time across multiple countries, and no one corrected it, or the facade is showing you something different on purpose, and neither of those options makes sense, but one of them has to be true. Let's go further. There's a building in Lyon, 1891, 14 stories. When they restored it in the 1990s, they had to submit the original drawings to get the permit approved. Those drawings are public record, you can request them. They show 14 floors labeled and dimensioned. The foundation drawings show support for 14 floors. The material invoices show stone and ironwork for 14 floors of windows. The windows were ordered, they were delivered. But when you stand outside and count, you see 9. Someone on a forum found the construction photographs from 1891. Black and white, low resolution but clear enough. You can see the workers installing the window frames. You can see them going up level by level. You can count them in the photo, and the photo shows 9. So the building was always like this. This isn't a mistake that happened later. This isn't a renovation that went wrong. It was built this way, intentionally, and no one at the time wrote down why. There's another layer to this. The windows themselves. If you go inside one of these buildings and stand at a window on, say, the 12th floor, you can look outside, you see the street, you see the skyline, you have a clear view the way you'd expect. But if you go to the street and try to figure out which window you were just looking through, you can't. The sight lines don't work. The window you were standing at should be visible from below, but it's not there. There's a stretch of stone or brick where it should be. This isn't about hidden floors or basements. Basements make sense. They're below ground. You wouldn't see windows for them at street level. This is about floors that exist above ground, floors you can visit, floors with windows that face outward, but the windows aren't on the outside. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee. Some of these buildings have glass facades now, renovations from the 2000s, full curtain walls, floor-to-ceiling windows, completely transparent. You'd think that would solve it. You'd think that once they stripped away the old stone or brick and replaced it with glass, the mismatch would disappear, but it doesn't. Even with a modern glass exterior, the count is still off. You can see into the building from the street. You can see the floor slabs, the ceilings, the divisions between levels. You can count them, and the number is still lower than the number of floors the elevator takes you to. At this point, the explanation starts to thin. You can't say it's about old construction techniques if it's still happening with modern materials. You can't say it's about renovations if it happens in both renovated and untouched buildings. You can't say it's isolated if it's happening in multiple countries with no shared architectural tradition. So what's left? There's one more thing, the spaces between. If you map out the floor heights based on the windows you can see from the outside and then compare that to the actual floor heights inside, there's a gap, not at the top, not at the bottom, in the middle. Somewhere between the 4th and 10th floors, depending on the building, there's a section where the math breaks, where the building is taller on the inside than it has any right to be based on what you're seeing from the street. You could say those are mechanical floors, floors for ventilation, for elevators, for utilities. And some buildings do have those, but mechanical floors don't have elevator stops. You can't press a button and visit them. The elevator in these buildings stops at every floor, every single one. And every floor has hallways, has doors, has rooms. They're not empty, they're in use. There's a building in Philadelphia where someone measured this. They used the windows as reference points and calculated the height of the building based on the spacing. Then they measured the actual height of the building with surveying equipment. The difference was 62 feet. 62 feet of building that doesn't correspond to anything visible from the outside. 5 floors, roughly. The exact number of floors the interior count exceeds the window count. 62 feet of stone and steel and glass that exists, that you can walk through, that shows up in the property records and the tax filings, but that the facade refuses to acknowledge. And the strangest part, no one who works in these buildings seems to notice, or if they do, it never comes up. There are no complaints, no concerns, no safety inspections that flag the discrepancy. The buildings pass code, they get certificates of occupancy, they operate for decades, and the mismatch just sits there in plain sight, uncommented on. It's not subtle, it's not hidden. You don't need special tools to see it, you just need to count. And yet it persists across time, across distance, across every reasonable explanation. This isn't the only place where this happens, and once you see where else it appears, you start realizing this wasn't an accident.